So the youth of 1976 faced vastly different circumstances to young people in South Africa today. Today's youth is facing challenges of high unemployment, gender-based violence, femicide crisis that we've been talking about this for the better part of the past 2 weeks or so. Well, let's find out what the views of today's youth on the state of the country are. For this discussion, I'm joined on Skype by student Awekgawe Mda, who is in Pretoria. We also have Marshall Lottering, who's supposed to join us. He's with the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund. I'm not sure if you're both there, but Awekgawe, I want to start with you and get your sense of Youth Day today and how it's changed from 76.
Certainly, Tembekile. I think greetings to the viewers, first of all. Thank you for having me. The challenges that we face as the youth in today have changed, fundamentally so. And I think I stand here as a black female in South Africa with a heavy heart, with everything that has been happening, or everything that has transpired, the violence and the brutal killings of women that have transpired. And for us to have a president to address us, talking about many movements that young people have led and innovations that we have been in the forefront of fighting for change. But they stand back and watch us. They don't fight with us. I think the challenges that we face today as rape, femicide, the fear of walking out of my door, the fear of not knowing where am I safe, am I next, when is my death date, just sitting and waiting, knowing that it is an inevitable occurrence in my life for me to face sexual harassment, for me to face rape, for me to face violence, for me to be violated in every way. We have it in schools, in hospitals, in work environments, everywhere. There is nowhere in where I am safe. The schooling environment, I mean, we were facing racism not so long ago. We have it in South Africa as well. Our government fails to put us first as black people, to put us first. Is that the government has changed, but the mentality of who leads us and the way in which our matters are put forward hasn't changed, because we are still at the end of the stick, at the short end of the stick. We are still being oppressed. We are still bleeding, walking in these streets with fear, and it is a difficult thing to live with.
And I want to then go through some of those points that you've raised in detail, and I want us to start with the point you were making about gender-based violence and how women in South Africa live in fear, and ask you, do you think that the moment of change in the country's femicide crisis would come from a sustained program of protests similar to what happened in 76 and that entire decade? Is that what it's going to take to finally get the killing and attacks on women to stop?
Certainly not. The process has to start somewhere. But I think protests are there to show the outrage, to show the pain. But unfortunately, at the end of the protest, we have to go home. We go home and face the reality. So where do we start to deal with this matter? We start with the system, the people in the system. I mean, we had President Ramaphosa, after Uyinene's Mrekana's death, addressing, saying he would put aside 68 million to deal with the criminal justice system that deals with sexual offenses, to deal with the policies, to review policies, and to put in place policies. Has that happened? And that's exactly what we need. What kind of training do police officers have to understand when a woman comes and says, I have been raped, the psychological impact on that person? Do they have the correct sensitivity to the matter? What kind of training to understand the psychological impact the offense has on the victim, that the police is able to now start the case in the way in which they have to, knowing and understanding the amount of pain this woman has endured, to come up and say, we have men reporting rape cases that are also not being taken seriously. So there needs to be a drastic change within the system, the education system. How are we teaching children to have this conversation? Men, it's not enough for us to stand in protest, put up signs. It is not signs that rape us. It is not, protests that change. It is the people that we are appealing to change the system for us, to understand the pain that we are going through, to understand the fear that we live in, the fear I have of my little sister leaving home, the fear I have when she's at school. There needs to be a change in the system, Tembekile, because that is where the crux of the issue is.
Hold on for me. I want to bring in Marshall Lottering. He's finally able to join us. Marshall, you're also on Skype, I believe. So you've heard the perspective of a young South African woman on the femicide issue. As a young man in present-day South Africa, how do you respond to the sense of helplessness from women who say it doesn't matter if they march, it doesn't matter what action is taken, they continue to be under siege at home, in the workplace, and everywhere else, really?
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. What I think, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Marshall. Go ahead.
What I think is the following, that protests are not going to solve the problem. It's not going to solve the problem because it doesn't help for us to get violent or to throw stones or to start fires. What we need to do as the youth of South Africa in today, we need to have advocacy discussions. We have to have memorandums that we are drawing up to give to the police and all their beneficiaries, that they must apply all the protection needs that we as the young people have. We must give that to the police and all the beneficiaries that is part of the National Gender-Based Violence program, and we must tell them that enough is enough. As the young people, we are not going to stand it because we don't want a future of violence. We want a future of calmness. We want a future of violence-free communities, and we want to reach our dreams and our goals to exceed in this life and not to be violated and to have violence in our communities, because this is the future generation and we want to take South Africa further.
You talk about handing over memorandums and communicating these issues to those in power, Marshall, but many women in South Africa will say they have marched, they have handed over memorandums, the problems are well known where the deficiencies in the police and justice system are, yet nothing has changed. So why would they believe that another march with a memorandum would change anything?
I think that our communities need to have the ability to stand together, if you know what I mean. They need to stand together, and they need to, as neighbors of each other, they need to come together and tell the men that are violating this woman, who is hitting this woman, to tell them that is not right. And it is a call to pray for us as young people. We need to pray to the Lord Almighty, or whoever we are serving or whoever our religion is in, that we need to tell them that God will provide, God will heal, God will make a way. So religion and faith and hope is the thing that will guide us through this, that will give us a part that we can say, our God is for us, who can be against us? And you say that memorandums and marches don't help. In a certain matter, it does, because in Worcester, Fastfax, last year on this special day, they had a march and they gave a memorandum to the police. And we didn't stop at that day with the police. We were going to the police every 2 weeks to ask them, what have you done to reduce violence in our community? And really, the violence numbers have lowered. It hasn't risen, it has lowered. So here in Worcester, you need to go to the police station with your memorandum, and then when you go with your memorandum, you must be persistent and you must tell them that you are not going to stop. Because they say that in Afrikaans, they state that as ons aanhou, dan gaan ons wen. If we continue, we will win, and we will break that cycle of violence. And I can say with faith in myself that in Worcester, where I'm living, Fastfax, Nelson Mandela Children's Fund, we had many discussions, and we made a change. And the change is going to happen as soon as possible.
Awekawe, let's come back to you. I want to ask you about the attitudes of young people in particular when it comes to issues of patriarchy, gender-based violence, and the sort of deconstruction work that needs to go into dealing with this problem beyond the legislative bits. When you look at the attitudes of people in their 20s and in their 30s who still see nothing wrong with the oppression of women or assaulting a woman, is that deliberate, do you think? Do they choose to deliberately ignore all the sides that have been presented in this discussion?
Certainly. It's certainly deliberate. I think one thing that men are also not doing is accepting, acknowledging that they have privilege. The fact that they will never know what it feels like. You can sit around any round table, have a discussion, you can march with me, you can protest. At the end of the day, it is a privilege that you have that you don't have to face. You will never know what it feels like. And it is the same with the whole Black Lives Matter issue. White people can stand in solidarity with us, but at the end of the day, they will never know what it feels like. But now when we talk about toxic masculinity, when we talk about patriarchy, when we talk about male presence and dominance in leadership, it is deliberate because that is a privilege that works for them. It is an advantage for them. It is a power tool, an authority tool that they can keep on their side. And it is deliberate. It is deliberate that men don't call each other out. You don't say in conversation, whoa, what you just said there enforces rape culture. And you should never, ever again repeat that. And you should actually start wonder why you think that way, because it is incorrect. Men do not lose friendships, do not lose businesses, do not lose anything from being the perpetrators that they are. They don't lose anything. They walk around free with us with us having to stay with that pain. So you see the youth, the conversations that are being held, it goes in one end, goes out the other. Mrototo, it's the same with, Temikile, it's the same with slacktivism. You know, we post I stand in solidarity with women on Twitter. It doesn't matter when you post it on Twitter, whether you post it or whether you don't. In conversation, in action, do you see a girl being catcalled? Do you see her? Do you see all of this? Do you make rape jokes? Because there's so many ways in which men contribute to the issue, and this sense of feeling attacked, that on its own questions, why do you feel attacked? If you've done nothing wrong, then why do you need to be defensive? Because men are very much aware of the privilege they hold in society. They're very much aware of the privilege that they keep and the fact that police, government is not putting them in line.
I want us to move on to some of the other themes then, and education, basic education back in the spotlight, apart from COVID-19. Marshall, and I'll start with you, because you're, 19 years old, so it's not been too long since you were in a classroom. We've been dealing this month with, again, reports of racism at the former Model C and private schools. Is that something that you experienced as a school pupil?
Because I was at a public school, which is a secondary school, I was given freedom to do what I want, to do what made me happy. Because for me it is that basic education in the COVID-19 now pandemic is that, why are you opening schools if you know the virus numbers are encountering, it is rising? For me, I had a discussion with somebody yesterday and I told them, for me, when it was my matric year, last year, and I must have been in this pandemic, I wouldn't have gone to school because I wouldn't have put my life in danger. Because I'm going to tell you right now that you can let me go to school, but you can't guarantee my life. And for me, it is such an norm in our communities that we want to force our young people. We want to force our young people to go to school when they are even scared. So for me, it is very, very unlikely to send children to school, to send pupils to school. For me, it is, and I have an opinion, I want to give them some inspiration and tell them, why don't you start with homeschooling? Because homeschooling is the new norm. You have more time to do most activities by yourself at your own time, at your own pace. Just like universities who does distant learning now, online and remote learning. So for me, it is that basic education system, it failed us.
But the reality, Marshall, is that most South Africans cannot afford homeschooling, especially if you are poor and live in a cramped environment with many other people, and you've got a sizable part of the school-going population in this country who, for example, have to indeed venture out to school because that's where, for example, they receive their only meal of the day. But I want to go back to Awekawe and talk about the issue of school racism that I was asking Marshall about, Awekawe, that's making headlines, and ask you the same question. Did you experience that as a young black girl?
Oh, certainly. Certainly, I experienced it in the classroom. I experienced it in the sports field. There was no way in which I could have a breather. And again, that's where intersectionality comes in, Thembekile. As a black female, there was so much scrutiny on me. There was more scrutiny on the length of my skirt than there was on how a teacher is discriminating and segregating his class based on color and gender. So definitely, racism is something that's evidently there in schools. And I think, again, the onus is up to the people that we appeal to. We've had so many situations in Pretoria, Kuro, where students have been separated by color, and they have gone viral. But what has that done for us? What lesson has government learned from that? What measures have been taken in place? There's so much victimization, bullying, violence that students face as a result of racism. And this goes back to in the classroom, the kind of conversations in which we're having are too censored.
And do you think then, Awekawe, that the situation will change, lastly, in this lifetime?
Most definitely. Most definitely. I think, Thembekile, young people, we are fed up. We are outraged, and it is a very dangerous thing to tell a young person today, right now, how to be when they are fighting. Because we have been obedient, we've been patient, we have been peaceful. We're not going to roam around attacking anyone, but we are certainly not going to be pushovers anymore. We will get the job done one way or another. My sister will not be subjected to the kind of treatment I was. Her voice will be heard. No matter how loud she is, her voice will be heard. Every child out there should go to school and be able to be in a safe environment without having to be looked down upon because of the color of their skin, their gender, their sexuality, ethnicity, nationality. It is not happening. As young people, we are fed up, we are outraged, we are fighting back. The government can fight with us or we'll fight it too, but nothing is standing in our way anymore.
Final question to you both, and Marshall, I'll let you have the first take. South Africa currently dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. We're hearing that jobs will be lost anywhere between 3 and 7 million. There is the femicide crisis and the various other issues that plague our country. What is your biggest worry as a young person in South Africa today?
My biggest worry, is for me to see that people are losing their jobs, especially when they are the sole breadwinner of a family. That breaks my heart, because where will that people get food? That's why I'm telling you that our economy is in a crisis, and I want to emphasize the fact that our young people needs to go to universities and colleges and not be accepted or declined upon their skin color or upon their race, because men and women are equal. Men and women are equal, and that's why I want to tell our young people to go and study. There isn't a thing of my mother and my father, my parents don't have money. Go and study. There are bursaries, and for me it is very, very sad and upsetting to see that people need to lose their jobs because of a pandemic that they didn't ask for.
Because
I think that, Thembekile, I apologize. I think
it's
there are
not a
many
problem.
concerns. I think Black businesses being affected, that's one. Again, unemployment is going to spike. I think schooling system, how are kids going back into the schooling environment, and how are they going to be adapting and adjusting? But I think my biggest one is definitely the attack on women right now. It is not going unnoticed. And the Minister of Women, young people, and people with disability, silence is not going unnoticed. Ms. Maita Nkwane Mashabane must know that we see her not seeing us. We see her not paying attention. We see her not rolling out any strategy, any plan to say, this is what's going to happen as a result. We have been in lockdown for over 2 months, and nothing has been said as people who are in their homes stuck with their abusers right now. This is the strategy. This is the plan. And with the help of the police, Bheki Cele is more concerned about the cigarettes and the alcohol than he is about the safety of women. The safety of women and children is definitely my biggest concern right now.
Awek Kawemda, Marshall Lotring, thank you both for speaking to me this afternoon.